Hi, Dr. Ruth Payne. We're on Chapter 5 of Emotional Poverty, Book 1. And this one looks at male brains and female brains, but particularly male brains. So before we ever start on this one, I just want to issue a couple disclaimers. Number one, this is a very controversial political topic right now, honestly. And there's a huge pushback at departments of higher ed of feminist studies for even talking about the difference in male and female brains. But as I said earlier in the introduction, our outcomes for males are not nearly as good as our outcomes for females. And part of it is because schools tend to operate in a more female brain friendly manner, okay? Now there's one brain is not better than another, they're just different. But one of the most interesting research studies I read was one out of Johns Hopkins University. And they were trying to define male and female, and they were actually never able to, because they're male and female brains structurally. In fact, a computer can tell 65 to 74% of the time whether they're dealing with a male or female brain just based on structure, okay? There's male and female genitalia, and 2 to 3% of the population is born either with no genitalia or double genitalia, i.e. intersex. And then Johns Hopkins University said, what do you call somebody who's got one brain and the opposite genitalia, transgender? And then on top of all of that, there's chromosome variations. Everybody knows about XX and XY, but there's XYY, there's XXY, there's XXXY. So they were never able actually to identify accurately or define male and female. So having said that now, when I use this term male brain and female brain, I'm talking about 75% of male brains and 75% of female brains. It's kind of like a Venn diagram. There's kind of that 25% that's shared, okay? But we're talking about patterns here. And in your book, on page 90 and 91, there's a chart. And we were very careful to document that chart. And what we did is you will see on the male side of the chart endnotes for each one of those, which is their documented source. But I'm just going to hone in on one example right now about male and female, 2 or 3 maybe. But for example, in the research, the average female brain will give you 15 minutes of talk time before they shut you off and decide you're not worth listening to. How many minutes on the average do you think a male brain give you before they shut you off and decide you're not worth listening to? Well, the research is somewhere around 5 minutes. Which means that some of them gave you 2 and some of them gave you 7. So the bottom line is another interesting detail is this. Female retinas on the average take in about 20% more light than male retinas do. And female retinas are hardwired to see detail and color. Male retinas are hardwired to see movement. So it starts early, kindergarten. The teacher says, color this picture where the little girl's got hers just perfectly. The little girl, colors it all in a detail. The little boy takes his crayon and he goes, the teacher goes, oh, honey. Okay. And school is about details. How letters are different, how numbers are different. It's huge. But one of the ones I want to stress for you now, since we're talking about emotional issues, is how male brains process emotional data in comparison to female brains, and a strategy for you. In the hard brain research, in a female brain, now you should know that in a female brain, they have more blood flow across hemispheres. Male brains have more blood flow within hemispheres. Now, your right hemisphere is more about emotion, your left hemisphere is more about language and analytics. So it makes sense that in a female brain, because there's more blood flow across hemispheres, it's going to be easier for a female brain to connect feelings with language. Much harder for a male brain. And in a female brain, on the average, that corpus callosum, that cord, in a female brain is 3/4 of an inch thicker than it is in a male brain. Well, Here's what happens. When a female brain has an emotional hit, by emotional hit, I mean anything that jeopardizes safety or belonging. On the average, that's throughout the whole female brain within 2.5 minutes. And the first thing a female brain will do is cry and talk. It's called tend and befriend. When a male brain has an emotional hit, anything that jeopardizes safety or belonging, it's in the base of the skull. And on the average, it takes 3 to 5 hours before that information makes it throughout their whole brain. And the first thing a male brain wants to do when it takes a hit is to be left alone and be silent. Well, here's what happens in the school business. We have two males get in a fight, okay? They get hauled in front of a female administrator, female teacher. What's the first thing we say to them? Talk to me. Tell me what happened. You know what? They barely know they've been in a fight, okay? And then when they don't talk, we discipline them a second time for being recalcitrant, defiant, non-cooperative. When a girl sits there and cries and talks, we don't punish her a second time for that. But we do punish males a second time. So let me suggest a better strategy. One of the first things you want them to do when you have them is not talk to them, but give them a bottle of water, 12 ounces of water. And don't talk to them until they drink it, because water metabolizes cortisol. So when they got upset, they produced cortisol. So what you want to do is you want the water to metabolize that cortisol. And one of the ways you know that's going on is when their shoulders start to relax. That's an indicator that the water has worked on the cortisol. When they're done drinking the water, one of the things, let me just give you this idea. A friend of mine does this. He's a behavior specialist. And he had 2 5th grade boys get in a fight. Well, they had a female administrator. She went after them for 45 minutes. Boys wouldn't talk to her. So they got Reuben. She said, Reuben, they're yours. So he put one outside his office in a chair. He put the other one in a chair beside him in his office. And he gave both boys water to drink. Now, in the research, why this is true, I don't know, but it's true. Male brains will talk more if you are shoulder to shoulder, not eye to eye. For whatever reason, it facilitates, they'll talk more. Recently I had somebody say to me, I'm going to make them look me in the face. I'm going to make them, they have to look me in the eyes. And I said, well, you could do that, but you just don't get as good information as if you sit shoulder to shoulder. And the second thing is, for whatever reasons, male brains talk more if they can do something with their hands, okay? If I want my son to talk to me, I ask him to cook with me. And I think the reason for it is that male brains have 7 times the gray matter in their brain that females' brain do, and gray matter is related to movement. But what Reuben started doing was bouncing a tennis ball while the boy's drinking the water, because he knows the boy's eyes are going to track that. And then when the boy's done with the water, he bounces the ball once to him, bounces it back. He says, catch it. We don't have much room in here. But while the boy's drinking the water, he's bouncing the ball, and he's slowing it down, because he wants the boy's eyes to track the movement, and he wants his heartbeat to slow down. Then he starts bouncing the ball. After about the 4th bounce back to the boy, he said to the boy very quietly, what happened? And in 4 minutes, he had the whole story. It's not the boy was recalcitrant or defiant or uncooperative. The boy just needed more processing time. And so one of the things we know is that emotionally, when you're dealing with male brains, they need more processing time. Enjoy chapter 5.